Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on what promises to be a really interesting conversation about how Microsoft 365 misconfiguration create vulnerabilities. My name is Abi. I'm a senior product marketing manager here at Abnormal, and I work on our security posture management product. And I also have Rohan with me on this call. He's going to be joining us from our product team. And so if you have any questions about anything we're discussing today, please drop your questions in the question and answers section. Rohan will help us answer them. And please make sure you use the Q&A box as opposed to the chat box. The Q&A box just helps us be organized and get to your questions. With that, let's dive right in. When we talk about misconfigurations, I want to talk about the types of misconfigurations we're going to talk about, right? That's what we're going to cover first. And then we'll go into a couple of case studies on actual threats that we've seen in the wild. We'll then quickly jump into a very brief demo of how the Abnormal platform helps you defend against these threats that we're seeing out in the wild. And we have some time slated for questions at the end of this conversation. However, if you have questions as we go through this, don't hold them till the end. Please put them in the Q&A box. So, misconfigurations inside of Microsoft 365. What does this mean? What are we talking about? Let's understand misconfigurations through an example. Let's take Entra, for example. Now, Entra is Microsoft's identity management application. And if you look at Entra, as I'm sure many of you have, you see all of these different options that you have to set different configurations within Entra. Every single thing you see on the left hand here opens up a brand new page. And if you click on items in that particular menu bar, you get additional sections. I did a brief estimate. There are about 50 pages of configurations just inside of Microsoft Entra. And if you zoom out and look at Microsoft 365 as a whole, there's Entra, there's SharePoint, there's Admin Center, there's Teams, there's Exchange, there's Defender, there's Purview, there's third-party applications, there's people postures. There's just screens, and there's just so many screens. There's about 500 different screens that you need to look through to basically make sure that all of your tools inside of Microsoft 365 are configured appropriately. And this is the reason why there's an opportunity for attackers. The sheer complexity of this system gives several blind spots that organizations might not be aware of, which attackers are now actively going after. And this is just Microsoft, right? And this is just email security. Think of all the other applications that you have that you need to go and look at the configuration settings for. So the complexity and the extreme control and flexibility of these platforms indirectly end up creating opportunities for attackers. And when we look at what attackers are doing, we're seeing that these misconfigurations are offering several points of entry for these attackers. And essentially, what they're doing is they're looking for conditional access or legacy authentication solutions. They're also looking for overly permissive applications that are involved, and they're trying to look at misconfigured admin roles, groups, or even privilege escalation settings to gain a foothold inside of this organization. An example of this is, let's say you have a service principal configuration that's configured overly permissively. Once an attacker gets access to this particular user and setting and understands that they now can take this token from this service principal, they no longer are bound by MFA or any of your privilege escalation security settings that you might have in place. They can simply go around them by using this token to have permissive access to read emails or additional access or whatever permissions that token grants them. And essentially, they're now circumventing the existing security settings by gaining access to these misconfigurations. As a consequence, the blast radius from one of these weaknesses increases, which seems extremely unfair, but is extremely common. So what can you do to defend against this? Well, first thing to do is to continuously evaluate Microsoft Entra to begin with, and then zoom out and look at the broader applications that exist inside of Microsoft. Second, you need to enforce strong identity policies. That involves disabling legacy authentication, making sure that every single user requires multi-factor authentication, and then trying to audit your conditional access policies and making sure that they're not overly permissive. And then you also have to govern integrations and review authentication scopes and tokens and things of that nature. Oops, sorry, just lost my screen there for a second. I'm going to go here. Let me see. Is my screen back up for everyone? All right, great. Sorry about that. And so let's take a look at a couple of examples of how these have been exploited in the wild. The first case study here is this particular incident where an attacker essentially sent a Microsoft Teams invite to users, asking them to join a particular meeting. And because the user didn't realize that this was a attack, essentially what they were doing by clicking on that link was approving a malicious OAuth application, which was essentially disguised as a Teams invite. Once approved, they got persistent API access, bypassing multi-factor authentication. And as a consequence, the user had given them access without any admin oversight. They were able to go and make use of the API and essentially remain undetected because of this misconfiguration that they were able to exploit. So even after password changes were made, even after other security configurations were enforced, they still had access, primarily because they now had stolen a token because of this misconfiguration. And as a consequence, they remained undetected and were able to do really bad things. So think about the configuration settings inside of Teams, right? One of the things that Teams allows you to do, which we've seen out in the wild, is it allows somebody else with a Teams tenant to initiate calls to your organization's Teams tenant as well, if this particular configuration is set to enable. And we've seen an incident where initially attackers will spam bomb a particular organization and then initiate a conversation through these misconfigured team setting, pretending to be the IT team, saying, hey, we're seeing that a lot of people are experiencing spam. Have you also been affected? On the user says, of course, yes. And then they send them a link and says, here, re-authenticated, it'll be fine. And the unsuspecting user clicks, and then obviously bad things happen. So that is one of the other ways in which we've seen attackers make use of misconfigurations. The second case study that I wanted to highlight here is that we've often seen organizations make investments in robust security tooling and setting. However, a lot of these things do not cover legacy authentication protocols like IMAP and POP. And so attackers understand this, and they're now looking for these legacy protocols being accidentally left enabled. So here's an example that we saw where attackers were able to authenticate using legacy protocols that allowed for password-only login. There was no requirement for MFA. And once inside, they basically used that compromised account to send out internal phishing and spam emails. And the reason this succeeded was primarily because the setting that allowed legacy authentication was enabled by default. And this happens often when Microsoft releases a new control or a new setting across any of these applications. They're left on by default because they do not want to break any sort of existing workflows or business processes in flight. However, because these things kept getting released at different cycles, and there's not enough bandwidth to proactively go and look at every single setting, these blind spots persist, and attackers who are being shrewd take advantage of these misconfigurations and then initiate attacks like this. And this is an example of one such attack that essentially succeeded, right? And once the stolen credentials provided immediate access, there was really no way to enforce modern protections because they don't cover your legacy authentication systems. As a consequence, in this particular scenario, the attacker gained full mailbox access, and they were able to go on and do additional internal phishing campaigns. And the first recourse when something like this happens, and you realize that there's a compromised user, is to basically update MFA and then enforce password reset. this did not help in stopping this one because, again, this was based on a legacy protocol. They were still able to go in and enter through that particular gateway, if you will. And as a consequence, these solutions that this particular organization tried to enforce didn't necessarily stop the attack. It was only after they found this out that they were able to go and shut down this blind spot within their organization. So all of this is to say that, we've seen that the settings that are currently offered inside of Microsoft 365 is extremely complicated. Uh, as I just showed, there's roughly 500 pages of settings and God knows how many other pages of documentation that you need to go through to make sure that you're appropriately configured, to make sure that there's no blind spots within your organization. And we're seeing that there's an increasing pattern of attackers going after these misconfigurations because, let's be honest here, these are not vulnerabilities. These are not 0 days. These are just blind spots that even the organization doesn't know that they have. And that's what makes them particularly dangerous. And so at Abnormal, when we were talking to a lot of our customers, this complexity challenge kept coming up. And as a consequence, we decided to take this on and we built our security posture management solution, which is what I want to show you right now. And so when we jump into the demo instance here, can everybody see my demo? Fantastic.
Okay.
Yeah. So when you jump into the Abnormal portal here, you will essentially see this new tab. So Security Posture Management is currently available for Microsoft 365 only. It is an additional paid add-on to the core Abnormal platform. And what the product essentially does is we pull in information regarding the state of your configuration from Microsoft 365 and automatically compare that against benchmarks from CIS, which is Center for Internet Safety. They publish guidelines on best practices on configuring Microsoft 365. And then we very quickly evaluate the state of your Microsoft 365 security posture. And from there, based on a intelligent smart scoring system, we tell you where you need to focus within your organization. And when we go into the demo in a little while, we also tell you once you have found these blind spots, you prioritize which of these blind spots to fix. How do you fix that? We give you step-by-step remediation guidance within the product that allows your team to go and fix these. Or if somebody else in your organization is responsible for fixing these, then you can export these out into whatever tickets or workflows you have so that they can also seamlessly fix this particular problem. So once you get security posture management, this is what you'll see. The screen gives you basically an overall grade for your security posture, and it also gives you grades for the individual areas of your security posture. So Entra, Teams, SharePoint, Exchange, all of these areas. We also look at people and application postures to essentially eliminate dormant identity risk and dormant application or excessively permissive application risk. We'll go into those details a little later. And so all of this is broken out and you can navigate to those areas from this section of your dashboard. Additionally, let's say you have a very complex organization, you have a parent tenant and several child tenants. You can look at all of the different tenants' security posture from just this particular dashboard. When we jump into evaluations, we basically see a list of different postures and their states as it relates to compliance with CIS benchmarks. And so let's jump into this particular posture here. Now, this is talking about Microsoft Authenticator. This particular posture is saying that Microsoft Authenticator, if you go into the About Posture section here, is configured in a manner that allows for MFA fatigue attacks. As some of you might be aware, MFA fatigue attack is when a person gets spammed with MFA notifications by an attacker, hoping that they accidentally accept this. In the case of the Uber breach, this was one of the tactics they used to essentially get into the organization. They kept spamming this poor person at like 2 a.m. and they kept getting notifications, and just to silence it or perhaps uh, sleepily they hit accept and the attackers had access, right? And so there is a setting inside of Microsoft Authenticator that allows you to make sure that this does not happen. And for this particular organization that we're looking at, it is disabled. And as a consequence, MFA fatigue attacks are possible. And so once we found that this was non-compliant, we also give you this quick priority assessment, which breaks down what is the risk reduction of making this policy compliant? Is it high, medium, low? And also, what is the cost of making this change within your organization? This is based on industry benchmarks and best practices, and also Abnormal's experience and what we've seen with our customers. This factors into account all of the change management processes, the ticketing, the assigning, workflows that organizations might have in place. And as a consequence, if you see this is if this policy is made compliant, there is a high risk reduction benefit. However, the cost of making this compliant is incredibly low. And if you want to know how to make this compliant under remediation guidance, we essentially use generative AI to basically look at the Microsoft portal documentation and break down step by step the step processes that the person needs to follow to go and make this from non-compliant to compliant. And if you want to get additional details on the context based on which we label this as a non-compliant policy, you can go here under view analysis. And when you click here, you have a lot of detail. So we'll give you a quick TLDR on why this particular posture came back as being non-compliant. The reason this was non-compliant was number matching, application context, and geographic location were not enabled. And as a consequence, this came back as failed. And so that's the details that we give. And again, the remediation guidance we gave you here is also repeated here. And we also give you some recommendations on how to communicate once you make this change in terms of the short term and also in terms of the long term within your organization. So you get all of this from Abnormal when you get security posture management. But let's assume you are using Okta or something else and you're managing all of your MFA settings inside of that particular application, and this does not matter for you. You can simply go here under the investigation workflow status and mark this as an accepted risk. And so when we run the next evaluation, we will not consider this policy as a part of that evaluation. And every single thing that you're seeing on your screen here can be exported out using our APIs and pushed into any sort of SIM or ticketing platform that you might be using so that you can then assign it out to whoever in your organization is responsible for going and fixing these things. So this is the security posture management tool in a brief overview. Additionally, I want to talk about this particular section here. This is based on first-party intelligence and also third-party intelligence. So when we find emerging attacks, like the few attacks that we just spoke about in this presentation, our research team will make sure that that information is also available across the respective postures within inside the security posture management tool as well. So you've gone ahead and you've fixed that particular posture, but there are several postures that are non-compliant for this particular organization. How do you prioritize? What if you could prioritize based on highest risk reduction benefit, but lowest business cost? Well, you can do that. By simply going under the priority level, if you click on critical postures, these are all postures that have high risk reduction and then low cost, and high is medium risk reduction and low cost. And basically that matrix is how we build this particular filtering logic. And once you have understood your blind spots, you prioritize the list of your blind spots and also fix them, it is important to make sure that your posture does not regress either through accident or perhaps through malicious intent once potentially a user's account has been compromised. And that's why we built the drift log capability. What this allows you to do is it basically allows you to take a view of your security posture across time. So you can see if your posture is getting worse over time or if it's increasing. And you can also see the different users in our organization that are contributing to this particular change in posture. And when you click on the view change details instead of drift log, you also see the JSON code for the before and after state, which gives you details on what essentially changed as relates to this particular posture that made it go from non-compliant to compliant. So this is security posture management from Abnormal in brief. Let's quickly jump back into the webinar and then go through a few more slides that we have for you. So I see that there are some questions coming in. If you have additional questions, please drop them in the Q&A box. We will get to them at the end of this webinar. So there were a couple of other pieces of information that I wanted to share with all of you. We have Abnormal Innovate coming in Jan 14th. This is a day-long session where security leaders and practitioners are talking about how they're securing their businesses from advanced threats. You will have an opportunity to listen to a customer of Abnormal who's used security posture management to essentially proactively close the door on these threats that have been lurking in their organization. You can hear from them on the processes that they used and how they're now scaling it across different organizations uh, in their environment. We also have sessions across different products from Abnormal, so I would highly recommend that you go and register to this particular session. If that isn't an incentive enough, the marketing team has also told me that the first 500 registrants win a chance, not win a chance, will get a scarf from Abnormal. Additionally, you also get enrolled in a chance to win a trip to San Francisco for the FIFA World Cup match that is going to be held there. So if you haven't registered for this, highly, highly recommend that you go and register for this. The FIFA tickets involve tickets, flights, accommodations, and a lot more. And so recommend that you go and look at this. And if you need those CPE credits, this event is also eligible for CPE credits. You can earn up to 4 CPE credits if you watch about 50 minutes of content. So we'll post the details in the chat, but this is about Abnormal Innovate. And I want to briefly talk about the Threats Team webinar series. We constantly highlight the threats that we're seeing as abnormal, and we will have both experts from the threat research team and also people from our product research team come and talk about the threats that they're seeing and how different parts of Abnormal can help you protect against those threats. This is an ongoing series. We have the next one of these happening on the 9th of Jan. Jesus Garcia is fantastic. Highly, highly recommend that you go and join his session. And if you want to learn about identity takeover, we have a session on identity takeover and how Abnormal AI detects and stops a real compromise. We will go over some case studies on the 20th of February. The registration links are on that page. And so, with that said, if you have any questions, please drop them in the chat and we will take them. Thank you.
Yeah, so Avi, we do have a couple of really interesting questions that I hope that we can answer live.
Yeah.
One of them being like, what are the most common Microsoft 365 misconfigurations that we've seen across Abnormal that have caused real risk?
Yeah. So, based on the customers that we've had so far, we often see Entra postures related to identity being one of the top misconfigurations. Additionally, there's a portion of the demo that I did not show, and so this helps me. We also see lots of dormant people and application risks in our customers. So when we jump back into the demo here, if we go into people postures, one of the things that we've seen fairly often is lots of users that have privileged roles inside an organization's environment that have stayed dormant for more than 90 days. And so, according to CIS, the best practice is to either make them inactive or delete these in your environment because these are often ripe for attackers to misuse. And so, people risks and also applications, third-party OAuth applications that have read-write permissions or excessive privilege that have been dormant for more than 90 days are also something that we find fairly common across different organizations. And as I mentioned in that example, dormant applications or fake applications are one of the common ways in which attackers tend to steal tokens and then remain undetected while still having access to your environment. So those are some of the common risks that we find. Fantastic question.
Thanks. Another one was, how often does Abnormal monitor my Microsoft 365 environment? I don't know if
Yeah.
you want to take that one or you want me to.
Yeah, Rohan, I think you should take that question.
Awesome. So we're continuously monitoring your system. So on a daily basis, it's run every 6 hours. And Abhi, if you can actually just step into the evaluations page on the demo portal.
Just sure. Stuck with the Zoom bar here. Let me move this over.
Yeah.
There we go.
Evaluations. Yeah. So If you can see right there on the right, there's a next evaluation button as well, where you'll see when the next evaluation is going to be run. So let's say you make a change in a tenant policy. It won't immediately show up in like within the next hour, but then you also have an idea of when that change might be reflected. And if it doesn't, then we'll also show you through like the view analysis of, hey, why it's still non-compliant, or if it did shift to compliant.
Thanks for that answer, Rohan.
Yeah, awesome.
We have a few more minutes here, team. So if you have any more questions, please drop them in the Q&A box, and be happy to take them.
Cool. We've got one final question that I can see.
Mhm.
And this is more related to something that you touched on. So how can the SPM findings be integrated into like existing SOC workflows or ticketing systems?
Yeah, so in terms of pulling all of this information out, whether it is the priority assessment information or the remediation guidance, and the remediation guidance is one of those areas that a lot of our customers find great value in. We've seen people do things as common as just copy the remediation guidance here and then paste it into the ticketing platform. However, we also have APIs that allow you to export pretty much all of the details that you're seeing here on the screen into whatever existing SIM SOC workflow systems that you might have. So in that way, you can seamlessly pull all of this data into those systems and assign it to perhaps if there's different teams in your organization that manage different parts of Microsoft 365, you can assign it to them and monitor the status of remediation.
Awesome. Thanks. I think we're getting to the end of the questions. Feel free to drop in. I know we just have a few minutes left, but I'm happy to
Yeah,
answer.
awesome. Thanks, Ron. Team, really appreciate all of you taking the time, and thank you for all of those wonderful questions. Again, if you are an existing Abnormal customer and if you want to try security posture management, please reach out to your CSM or your account representative, and they can walk you through it and help set up a trial. If you are a net new customer to Abnormal and want to find out more about security posture management, you can go to our website and learn more about SPM. And we've also dropped the link to Abnormal Innovate. So highly recommend if you haven't to go and register so that you can go watch the Football World Cup in San Francisco. With that, thank you so much for taking the time. We really appreciate you being a partner with Abnormal and hope you all have a great rest of the day. Thanks.